A very late budget, leaving limited time left in the legislative session. Hear from a Democratic lawmaker on the changes they want to see to keep the budget from being late in the future. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. The state budget for fiscal year 2026 is officially the latest state budget in 15 years.
Now, in addition to being a spending plan, the budget also included some major legislation, such as the child tax credits, as well as changes to the state's discovery laws and involuntary commitment laws.
Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley criticized the late spending plan, saying most of the policies that held at the budget talks for more than a month represent small steps when comprehensive action was needed. Actions to address involuntary commitment, discovery reform, and the statewide mask ban could have gone further and hopefully will do so in the future.
Now, in addition to the policy changes, the $254 billion spending plan delivers major funding for small businesses and pays for free school lunches. Now that the budget is passed, other items lawmakers had hoped to pass are now on a time crunch. One lawmaker explains.
We have 17 more session days. We've had session extended till June 17th. So we'll have a total of 17 more working days left before the end of session. And those 17 days are going to be full flat out. It's going to be a run to the roses and a run to the finish line.
Joining us now to give additional insight and reaction to the late state budget is State Senator James Skoufis. He's a Democrat representing the 42nd District. Senator, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who don't know, you've been critical of the state budget. What would you like to see changed in the coming years?
Yeah, so there are two pieces to this. The first piece is what was actually in the budget, the outcomes that were negotiated. And with any budget, there was some good, there was some bad, and we could definitely get into that. But I think that a lot of the focus has been on how we got here. What was the process by which this budget was negotiated? And you know, I shared floor remarks. I've been very vocal since that this process and this system is broken. You know, we have 63 state senators, 150 assembly members who are largely relegated to the sidelines, and you have a very small number of folks, and primarily you have unelected, faceless staff who are at the executive branch level able to basically veto the legislative proposals that actually come from the elected officials. And so this process has to change. The budget, I would strongly argue, is not a reflection of a functioning democracy. And if voters knew just how the sausage was actually made in Albany, they'd be appalled. And so my hope is that the legislature can exert itself, can stand up for itself, and has the guts to make ourselves the co-equal branch that our framers intended us to be, who put together the state constitution over a couple of centuries ago. And so that's our mission. We need to fix this deeply broken system.
And I know as a part of the state budget, you've been critical about the rebate checks that will be going out to New Yorkers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Affordability is on everybody's mind, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and especially here in New York State. It is very difficult for many people to live in this state. We're a high tax state, we're a high cost of living state. And I do take exception with the governor's proposal that, you know, these modest one-time checks that are going to be sent out to households that maybe are going to bear her signature are somehow going to put any kind of meaningful dent into the actual root of the problem here, which is how expensive it is to live in New York. These checks are going to wind up paying for a small fraction of one single winter utility bill. We have to do a lot better. Any suggestion that, you know, this is some panacea, this is going to change lives is not honest. And I much would have rather have seen that $2 billion actually go to good use that will make long-term meaningful impact on people's ability to live in this state.
And because this budget was so late, there's now a crunch to get other bills across the finish line before the legislative session ends in June. Can you talk about what you would like to see done before that time frame ends?
Yeah, so certainly I have a number of pieces of legislation that I'll be pushing very hard over the next several weeks, one of which would provide $1 billion in small business relief without coming at a single cost a dime of the state budget or taxpayers, and that is by prohibiting these swipe fees, these credit card swipe fees that employers and businesses pay from being applied to things like sales tax and tips that have nothing to do with actually the good or the service that is being provided. And so we need some small business affordability relief for both residents and small businesses. But there are a lot of contentious items that are under conversation right now. There's medical aid in dying, which passed the Assembly. We're going to see whether the votes are there in the Senate to move forward with that piece of legislation. We also have an enhanced bottle bill. We have another environmental priority that's referred to as EPR, which really puts the onus on these manufacturers to actually recycle instead of local communities and residents having to recycle all these plastics that are produced by these large corporations. And so there are a lot of conversations that are just now, unfortunately, only getting underway because the budget was so late, the latest budget in 15 years. Usually these conversations would have started a month ago, but now we've got a truncated schedule to try and get all of our priorities done.
Sounds like you guys will be busy in the weeks ahead. Senator Skoufis, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Take care.
Prison advocates are pushing for reforms following the death of Robert Brooks at Marcy Correctional.
When we return, hear from one lawmaker supporting these reforms, the changes she's pushing to see before the legislative session ends.
And of course, if you have a comment or story idea, please tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We are also on X at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. With limited time remaining in this legislative session, lawmakers in Albany working to raise awareness about key legislation that they're hoping to get over the finish line. 9
bills seeing a push this week that could make changes to the state's prison system. Robert Ricks, the father of Robert Brooks, who died after being beaten at Marcy Correctional Facility, speaking in Albany this week to talk about the importance of passing this legislation.
If you've never buried a child, you probably won't understand the depth of my pain. But if you've never buried a child and watched them beat to death on video, then you definitely won't understand my pain. I believe that had these 9 bills been in place, I wouldn't be here today, and my son would still be alive.
Now, after that press conference, the DOCS commissioner spoke before lawmakers testifying about the steps already being taken to help prevent other deaths from happening, such as requiring body cameras to be activated any time a guard interacts with the prison population.
Joining us now to give additional insight on the push to pass prison reform legislation is State Senator Julia Salazar. She's a Democrat representing the 18th District. Thank you so much, Senator, for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I know earlier this week, Robert Ricks, the father of Robert Brooks, was at the state capitol. He was calling for more legislation to be passed. There was 9 bills that he would like to see done by the time session ends. I know we don't have time to get into all 9 of those bills, but can you break down some of them and what that would do for the prison system?
Yes, absolutely. So what's very important for everyone to know is that Robert Ricks is the father of Robert Brooks, a man who was incarcerated at Marcy Correctional Facility near Utica in central New York. And Robert Brooks was killed by correction officers in December. Several of those officers have since been charged with murder as well as additional charges related to the crime that they committed against Mr. Brooks. Mr. Ricks, his father, testified at the hearing in support of legislation that I sponsor that, for one, would change the disciplinary system in DOCS. This is important because right now in our state prisons, if an officer is accused and even found to have committed excessive use of force, in other words, used physical violence when it was not appropriate against someone who is incarcerated, it is extremely difficult to terminate that officer's employment, to fire them. We actually know that several of the officers who were involved in the murder of Robert Brooks, as well as officers who were involved in the murder just a couple months later of another incarcerated man named Messiah Nantwi, those officers were previously credibly accused of using violence against incarcerated people in other incidents. If they had been fired, it's quite possible that Mr. Brooks would still be alive today, as well as Mr. Nantwi. This is a failure of the disciplinary process in DOCS, where even if someone is credibly accused of this kind of violence as a correction officer, ultimately an unaccountable arbitrator makes the final determination about whether or not that officer is fired and how they are disciplined, rather than that determination, that decision resting with the DOCS commissioner. What this bill would do, that I sponsor, it would ensure that the commissioner actually has the final say in whether or not an officer is fired. And that's really important because the DOCS commissioner is publicly accountable, and that would not only bring more transparency, but I believe ensure that violent officers are not able to continue to do this to incarcerated New Yorkers. Additionally, there is legislation that would create something called the Office of the Correctional Ombudsperson. This would be a new, truly independent agency to provide comprehensive oversight, conduct investigations, and provide accountability in our prison system that is desperately lacking. Right now, we primarily rely on DOCS itself, the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, to investigate itself and its own staff. And there's really no integrity in that. And of course, it continues to fail us. So that is another bill. I can tell you about this entire legislative agenda, but what I think brings all of these bills together is the urgent need for us to expand accountability in our prison system and prevent incidents like this, the murders of incarcerated New Yorkers, as well as the rampant brutality that we see in this system, from continuing.
And I know there was a legislative hearing recently with the DOCS commissioner coming and talking with lawmakers. Can you talk about what came out of that for people that may not know that it happened?
Absolutely. 2 days ago, we held a joint legislative hearing, both the Senate and the Assembly, to specifically look at this problem of violence against people in New York State prisons, people who are in custody, as well as accountability and transparency in the system. The DOCS commissioner testified, and he did mention in his testimony that some measures have been taken, which I appreciate, by the governor and by the DOCS commissioner to try to address these problems without changing existing law. Increasing their work with the Correctional Association of New York, which is the only independent agency that exists in law that has the ability to enter correctional facilities and produce reports. They do incredible work, although they are a nonprofit organization that should be empowered more to do this work. He talked about efforts to bring comprehensive camera coverage to state prisons, which is something I'm also committed to and is one of the bills in this package would seek to do as well, and improving the body-worn camera policy in state prisons. But we actually did not hear testimony in person from the State Commission of Correction, and that speaks to a problem. This is an agency that is supposed to oversee state prisons and jails across the entire state. They failed to testify. But I think the most powerful testimony that we heard 2 days ago at this hearing was from Mr. Ricks, the father of Robert Brooks, also a woman named Jessica Lowe, whose father died as a result of brutality that he experienced less than 2 years ago in a New York State prison. And we also heard from a mentor and loved one of Messiah Nantwi, the young man, he was only 22 years old, who was killed by correction officers who are now facing criminal prosecution. That was just in February. So hearing from them, also hearing from formerly incarcerated New Yorkers who have become experts in these policies, and hearing them advocate for this legislative agenda for 9 bills and even more to transform our prison system was really powerful, and it needs to inform the action that the legislature takes with the remaining time that we have this session.
Yeah, and my final question for you is, do you think that this legislation will pass before session ends in mid-June?
I am incredibly determined to see all of these bills pass before the session ends in the middle of June. And I think it would be unacceptable for us to return to our districts without taking action on this. It is just rampant violence in our prisons in New York, and that has been the case for a long time. It's only in the past 5 to 6 months, because of the video that was shown to the world of the murder of Robert Brooks, and also what has since come out about the murder of Messiah Nantwi, that everyday New Yorkers now know about this brutality that has persisted for a long time. And I believe we would be failing New Yorkers if, as a legislature, we do not take action on this and pass these bills, make sure they become law, so that we can transform this system. We need meaningful change, and I believe we need to change the law in order to achieve that.
All right, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Senator Julia Salazar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jamie.
Turning to issues downstate, a new poll revealing where most residents stand on some key issues.
We'll hear from reporter Henry Rossoff on the latest polling. If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN.
Welcome back. New polling giving insight into where our voters are landing on the elections out in New York City. Here to give us the latest on that, Henry Rossoff, reporter for Pix 11 in the wonderful Manhattan City. And Henry, thanks for coming on again. Let's talk about this Quinnipiac poll, right?
Yes, correct. And it has former Governor Andrew Cuomo well ahead once again. This was a very detailed poll. He's at 44%. You have Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani, still sort of the clear second choice, but way behind at 22%. And what makes this poll interesting, we have ranked choice voting here, which I know may be a little bit confusing to people, but the basic premise is that people at the bottom get eliminated and their support flows to second, third, fourth, and fifth choices above them. And when push comes to shove, you have votes splitting enough between Cuomo and Mamdani to where it means Cuomo still wins in a ranked choice system. Progressives had been banking on this ranked system to sort of flow support to the likes of Mamdani, perhaps Comptroller Brad Lander, perhaps City Council Speaker Adrian Adams, but enough support is still flowing to Cuomo to where he wins when you run this sort of convoluted ranking process.
Let's talk about funding a little bit. There was also a big decision you said regarding some of the campaign financing, right?
That's right. There was sort of a paperwork snafu with former Governor Cuomo getting millions of dollars in matching funds he's entitled to under the city matching fund system. He seemed to sort out his paperwork and got more than $1 million in the last tranche of money, which will be big because TV will become increasingly important as this race come down to the wire in the next month. But he was also penalized, something like $600,000, because he's been accused by the Campaign Finance Board of essentially colluding with the main super PAC supporting him, which sparked a whole news cycle of essentially everyone else in the race accusing him of more corruption, more dirty politics, and another. So even though he got a lot of money that will be very important to his campaign, he was denied a lot of money, and it has sparked somewhat of a negative news cycle for him as well.
Do you get a sense that with Cuomo, he's a little bit insulated from criticism because it's sort of already baked in? People know who he is. Obviously, voters already know about the way he left office with the sex scandal, whatever that was. He disagrees with it, but the book deal, the nursing home deaths. I mean, people know who he is, and I mean, really, what's left to hurt him if he's still in the lead?
I'm talking to a lot of voters, and let me just give you some insight. I'm hearing a lot of statements that go something like this. It's like, well, but can he run the city right? Well, can he clean up the city? Well, can he build housing? That's kind of where people are at. People are seemingly willing to overlook a lot of the concerns you just outlaid if he can address the big problems. And a majority, or at least a plurality of voters at this point, do seem to be believing that Cuomo is equipped to be the next mayor.
They must also feel, too, if ever there was a guy that could stand up to President Trump, it would be Andrew. Really quick, he did some New Jersey polling. That's taking shape, too, right?
Yeah, clear front runners. You have Mikey Sherrill, the congresswoman. She is the clear front runner on the Democratic side. Former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, he was the nominee last time, almost unseated Governor Murphy over there in New Jersey. Clear Republican front runner. So it looks like it's Sherrill versus Ciattarelli if our polling holds over the next month. All
right, lots to keep you busy. Henry Rossoff joining us now for Pix 11. Thank you, Henry. As always, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
If you've got a comment or story idea, please tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We are also on X, which some of us still call Twitter, at WTEN. Finally, at Empire State Weekly, we are continuing to keep an eye on the impact the state budget will have on you. Next week, we'll once again be talking with the state budget director, Blake Washington.
We'll look to find out more details about the $3 billion set aside in the state budget to give rebate checks to taxpayers. They range from $150 to $400, depending on how much you make and whether you're filing single or as a married couple. We'll look to find out how soon you could get paid.
For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. We'll see you here next week.
And don't you forget, you can watch this show all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on not one or two, but 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.